Arsène Lupin vs. Herlock Sholmes, Episode 2, The First Collision. Welcome back, Detective. Last time, Lupin humiliated Herlock Sholmes by stealing a diamond 2 weeks before the announced theft. But a detective of Sholmes's caliber doesn't make the same mistake twice. Today, we witness his counterattack when brilliant deduction goes on the offensive. Can even Arsène Lupin evade a detective who's learned from his first defeat? Or will Sholmes discover that learning Lupin's past methods doesn't prepare you for his future ones? Picture this: April 1908, 1 month after the Blue Diamond embarrassment. Sholmes has spent every waking hour studying Lupin's criminal history, building what he calls a psychological architecture of the gentleman thief's mind. He's identified patterns in target selection, timing preferences, escape routes, even the poetic style of Lupin's mocking letters. Every criminal has patterns, Sholmes tells Ganimard confidently. Lupin's genius hides his, but they exist. And I've found them. His analysis reveals something intriguing. Lupin targets a specific type of victim, wealthy individuals whose fortunes involve some moral compromise, some original sin that taints their treasures. The baron whose art was looted from colonies, the count who defrauded widows, the duchess whose jewels were payment for political betrayals. Lupin sees himself as an agent of poetic justice, Sholmes explains. This self-image is his weakness, because it makes him predictable. Think about this deduction, my apprentice. Is Sholmes right that Lupin's moral code creates predictable patterns? Or is he falling into a trap, assuming that patterns observed in the past will continue into the future? What would you do if you were Lupin, knowing a brilliant detective was analyzing your previous crimes? Sholmes's research identifies the perfect next target, the Countess de Crozon, who possesses the legendary Ring of Kings, a ruby once owned by Louis XIV, worth £500,000. The Countess's late husband obtained it through blackmail against a desperate aristocrat, a fact carefully buried in old court records that Sholmes has uncovered. This is exactly Lupin's type of target, Sholmes declares. Valuable, historically significant, tainted by immoral acquisition. He'll strike within the month. But here's where Sholmes's genius truly emerges. Instead of simply warning the Countess and preparing defenses, he does something revolutionary. He predicts exactly when and how Lupin will strike. Lupin prefers significant dates, Sholmes explains, consulting his notes. The anniversary of the original blackmail is April 17th. He'll strike, then, using his signature method of infiltrating social events as a disguised guest. The Countess is hosting a ball that evening. Perfect opportunity. Ganimard is skeptical, but couldn't. Lupin simply change his plans once he knows you've predicted them. Sholmes's smile is absolutely confident. That's precisely my trap, Inspector. I'm not announcing my predictions publicly. Lupin won't know I'm waiting until it's too late. For once, the element of surprise belongs to the detective, not the thief. The plan is elegant in its simplicity. Sholmes will attend the ball himself, disguised as a minor Belgian aristocrat. He'll observe every guest, analyzing their behavior for signs of Lupin's presence. Meanwhile, he's created a detailed profile of how Lupin will appear. He'll be disguised as someone with legitimate reasons to approach the Countess, probably a distant relative or old family friend. His disguise will be male, aged 50 to 60, since older men attract less suspicion. He'll create an opportunity to be alone with the Countess's jewel case, claiming to admire the Ring of Kings specifically. Think about how thorough this prediction is. Detective Sholmes has anticipated not just when and where, but how and as whom. If he's correct, Lupin walks directly into capture. But what if Sholmes's assumptions about predictability are themselves part of Lupin's larger game? April 17th arrives. The Countess's ball is a glittering affair, 300 guests, chandeliers blazing, champagne flowing. Sholmes, disguised as the Baron de Vaudreuil, positions himself strategically to observe. He's compiled a list of every invited guest and identified 7 who could potentially be Lupin in disguise based on his profile. 3 elderly uncles, 2 old family friends, and 2 distant cousins, all male, all aged 50 to 60, all with legitimate access. For 3 hours, Sholmes observes these 7 suspects with microscopic attention. He notes how they walk, talk, interact with others. He watches for the telltale signs of disguise, makeup edges, voice strain, behavioral inconsistencies. His methods are brilliant, his focus absolute. This is detective work as performance art. Then, at precisely 10 p.m., it happens. One of the elderly uncles, Monsieur de Tige, supposedly the Countess's father's brother, approaches her during a waltz and asks to see the Ring of Kings. "My dear niece," he says warmly, "I haven't seen my brother's famous acquisition in years. Might you indulge an old man's nostalgia?" Sholmes's pulse quickens. This matches his prediction exactly. Elderly male relative, direct approach, specific interest in the ring. He signals Ganimard, who waits nearby with officers. The trap is springing perfectly. The Countess, flattered by her uncle's interest, leads him to her private study, where the ring sits in a display case. Sholmes and Ganimard follow discreetly. Through the partially open door, they watch as Uncle Detige examines the ring, his hands trembling with what could be either age or excitement. He asks the Countess about its history, its acquisition, the story of the original blackmail, questions that seem innocent but probe for guilt. Now, Sholmes bursts through the door with Ganimard and 4 officers. "Arsène Lupin, you're under arrest. Remove your disguise immediately." The elderly uncle stares at them in absolute bewilderment. "Lupin, are you mad? I'm Edouard Detige, the Countess's actual uncle. We've known each other for 40 years. Think about this moment. My apprentice." Sholmes's deduction was perfect. The timing, the method, the profile. But what if he's caught the wrong person? What if Lupin knew Sholmes would make exactly this prediction and used it against him? Chaos erupts. The Countess confirms that this really is her uncle Edouard, not an impostor. She produces family photographs, decades of correspondence, witnesses who've known him since childhood. Sholmes's certainty crumbles as the evidence mounts. He's made a catastrophic error, publicly accusing an innocent aristocrat of being a criminal based on pure deduction. But if Uncle Edouard isn't Lupin, then where is the real thief? Sholmes realizes with growing horror that while he was focused on his 7 male suspects aged 50 to 60, Lupin could have been anyone else at the ball, or perhaps not at the ball at all. Perhaps the entire prediction was wrong. As Sholmes stammers apologies to the outraged uncle, something catches his eye. The Countess's young lady's companion, a quiet woman named Mademoiselle Jean, who's been present all evening helping host the ball, is slipping away, toward the servants' entrance. Something about her movement seems wrong, too purposeful, too aware of sightlines. "Stop that woman!" Sholmes shouts, but she's already gone, vanished into the crowded ballroom. By the time they search, she's nowhere to be found. And when the Countess checks her jewel case an hour later, the Ring of Kings is missing, replaced by a familiar calling card. "Dear Mr. Sholmes, thank you for providing such excellent distraction with your dramatic accusation. While everyone watched your magnificent deductive failure, I completed my work unnoticed. Better luck next time. Your devoted opponent, A. The humiliation is complete and public." Sholmes not only failed to prevent the theft, he actively facilitated it by creating chaos that covered Lupin's escape. The newspapers are merciless. British detective's second failure. Accuses innocent aristocrat while Lupin escapes again. But here's what fascinates me about this defeat. Detective Sholmes's deductions weren't wrong. Lupin did target the Countess de Crazen because of the ring's immoral acquisition. He did strike on April 17th, the anniversary date. He did infiltrate the ball as a disguised guest. Every element of Sholmes's prediction was accurate, except the most crucial one. Sholmes assumed Lupin would follow his previous pattern of male disguises aged 50 to 60. But Lupin, knowing he was being analyzed, deliberately chose a young female disguise instead, his first recorded use of cross-gender deception. He didn't avoid the predictable target, date, or location. He only changed the one element Sholmes considered most certain: his disguises, gender, and age. Think about the psychological brilliance here. By getting 90% of the prediction right, Sholmes trapped himself into absolute certainty about the remaining 10%. He focused so intently on finding the predicted disguise that he ignored the unpredicted one. Lupin didn't escape Sholmes's deductive net. He hid inside it in a form Sholmes's assumptions made invisible. That evening, both men receive letters. This is becoming their method of communication, a paper trail of intellectual warfare. Sholmes finds his at the hotel. Dear Herlock, your deductive abilities are indeed formidable. You predicted my target, timing, and method with impressive accuracy. But you made a critical error. You assumed I would repeat my past patterns even knowing you'd studied them. Real genius isn't following patterns, it's knowing exactly which pattern to break and when. The game continues. A.L. and Lupin receives his response. Monsieur Lupin, congratulations on your second victory. However, you've now revealed your meta-pattern. You deliberately break patterns you know are being analyzed. This is itself a pattern, one I will exploit in our next encounter. You cannot escape pattern entirely, because unpredictability itself becomes predictable with sufficient observation. The game continues, indeed. HS now consider these letters carefully. My apprentice. They're not just taunts, they're moves in a chess game played with words and ideas. Sholmes has identified that Lupin breaks predicted patterns. Lupin has acknowledged this, but now what? If Lupin knows that Sholmes knows he breaks patterns, does he return to following patterns? And if Sholmes expects that return, does Lupin break patterns again? How many levels deep does this psychological warfare go? Inspector Ganimard watches these intellectual gymnastics with growing frustration. Gentlemen, while you two exchange philosophical letters, actual crimes are occurring. Can we please focus on capturing the criminal? But both Sholmes and Lupin seem more interested in defeating each other intellectually than in mere arrest or escape. Sholmes begins his next analysis with renewed determination. Lupin thinks he's won because he surprised me with an unexpected disguise. But he's revealed something crucial. He monitors my investigation methods. This means he has a source inside the investigation, or he's observing my activities directly. If I can identify how he gains his intelligence about my methods, I can feed him false information and predict his true moves. This is brilliant detective reasoning, turning Lupin's information advantage into a vulnerability by controlling what information he receives. But it assumes Lupin's intelligence gathering is detectable. What if the gentleman thief has methods Sholmes hasn't imagined? Meanwhile, Lupin tells his trusted associate Grognard, Sholmes is more dangerous than I anticipated. He's not just solving crimes, he's trying to solve me, to build a complete psychological model that predicts my decisions. I need to become deliberately inconsistent to introduce noise into his analysis. Random targets, random methods, random timing. If he can't find patterns, he can't make predictions. But Grognard raises a crucial objection. If you become random, you lose your own strategic advantage. Your carefully planned heists become mere robberies. You risk becoming the common criminal Sholmes claims you are. This dilemma cuts deep to defeat Sholmes's pattern analysis. Must Lupin abandon the artistry that defines him? The newspapers continue, breathlessly reporting each development. The great duel continues. Genius vs. genius in battle of wits. Public opinion divides sharply. Some admire Sholmes's scientific approach. Others celebrate Lupin's artistic audacity. Bets are placed in Parisian cafes about who will ultimately triumph. What emerges from this second encounter is a fundamental truth about their conflict. Sholmes represents the belief that everything can be understood through reason and analysis. Lupin represents the belief that creativity and innovation can always transcend systematic understanding. Neither is entirely right, neither entirely wrong. So tell me, detective, whose approach do you find more compelling? Sholmes's faith that sufficient analysis makes everything predictable, or Lupin's confidence that human creativity can always surprise systematic thinking? And, more importantly, is there a synthesis that combines both approaches? This first collision has established the rules of their game. Sholmes will analyze, predict, and prepare. Lupin will observe those preparations and find the creative loophole. Each encounter teaches both men new lessons, but also reveals new vulnerabilities. The question isn't who's more intelligent, they're equally brilliant. The question is whose type of intelligence proves more adaptable. As Paris watches this intellectual spectacle, both men prepare for round 3. Sholmes develops more sophisticated analytical frameworks, accounting for Lupin's pattern-breaking tendencies. Lupin studies game theory and probability, looking for mathematical ways to remain genuinely unpredictable. The stakes rise with each encounter. Join me next time for the tragedy of the dueled woman, where their intellectual duel has real consequences. A beautiful aristocrat becomes caught between these two titans, and her fate will force both men to question whether winning their game is worth the human cost. Can genius coexist with compassion, or must one be sacrificed for the other?